Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to a Tea Club edition, volume 25. We're here with Madam Maxwell again, and we're rebroadcasting this on YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, Odyssey, MGTOW, Adam Maxwell's YouTube, Rumble, and I think we're on LinkedIn and Facebook. All right, got them all. Good. Everybody join us. Welcome. And we're on Telegram too. So yeah, all links in the description. So take her away, Adam. What are we talking about today?
Today, the 27th of February, 2025, thought we'd talk about the Soviet Union of Europe, the Eurocrat collapse. The European Union is unraveling economically, politically, socially. It mostly comes down to central planning, right, as the Soviet Union did. So I think we'll be looking into the authoritarian tendencies, economic mismanagement, and the doomed policies leading to the EU's toward total collapse.
Yeah, I mean it's getting close. You're in the EU. I'm in the EU. I'm in Georgia, which is they were given EU candidate status, and I guess they temporarily withdrew that for a little bit because the laws that they were passing here were kind of anti-EU agenda or anti-woke agenda, I guess, and they believe that they were pro-Russian in some fashion. I don't know how, because there wasn't anything about pro-Russia. It was just the same laws they were passing were similar to laws that are already on the books in the United States. Other than they had an anti-gay bill or something like that, or law that they passed. I don't know the full extent of how that transpired, but I guess apparently Russia passed a similar law, so that's how they tied them two together. But nonetheless, we're like the prediction I made 10 years ago. I wrote an article, posted on LinkedIn, and I predicted in 2025 we would see an economic downturn, starting with a housing bubble, or this is before crypto. My camera's focusing bad, but it's okay. This was before crypto and the COVID lockdowns and all kinds of wonderful stuff that went on, the Trump elections, all the stuff that I didn't foresee. But we're in 2025 in the first quarter, and we saw a huge correction in the crypto market. Dow is up, but of course we know that the Dow is or the stock market is heavily manipulated by four of the largest banks and trading firms in the world, BlackRock being one of them. And basically, it's a circus because the boomers have all their 401ks, assets, there's pensions, there's a lot of money at stake that's keeping the stock market afloat. But when the housing market takes a huge correction, which I said is going to happen, it's probably going to happen this month, in the month of March, because we're like 2 days away from that. I was saying that it was probably going to happen first quarter of 2025. We're going to start seeing major corrections, which we did see in the crypto market. We saw a huge sell-off. So generally the crypto market is kind of linked to stock market. So when you see a crypto sell-off, then you'll see the stock market show signs of sell-off generally. We didn't see that. So that gives me the impression that something is going on. So are these hedge funds, and are they using crypto were they selling off crypto for something else? Are they trying to manipulate the market, pump and dump? I don't know what's going on. I mean, I think a stock market correction is coming, and I think the housing bubble is coming. We're seeing it in Europe right now, like in Georgia, like they're building like crazy here. They've overbuilt, and it's just that there's 15 buildings. There's 15 like residential slave towers gone up or actively being built right now in my neighborhood. Just in my district, like my little neighborhood district that I can see. There's other neighborhoods within my district, and I'm in just one part of the capital in Tbilisi. So there's projects all over the city, and there's projects in other cities in Georgia, and they're building like crazy. And a lot of these buildings that are already been built that are in my area that I can see every day outside my window, as you guys can see behind me, they are empty. There's nobody renting them. There's nobody occupying them. They're like half empty buildings that are already built. There's buildings that have just been built when I've arrived here like 3 months ago, and they're still empty. So I don't see anybody moving in. I don't see any construction or anybody like renovating these, or, you know. And the last couple of days has been interesting because there was a lot of Russians that live in my building. I don't want to tell you exactly what building I live in, but there's a lot of Russians that moved out just in the last week because of the peace deal that came out in Ukraine. I'm assuming that's why they left and they went back to Russia because the war is over. So I'm seeing a lot of Russians leaving Georgia right now, the capital. You know, that's just what I've observed in my immediate area that I'm reporting, basically. What are you seeing in Bulgaria, in the EU? Any signs of economic distress or any differences?
The distress, there's protests going on due to inflationary price increases at the supermarkets, and people are saying, allegedly, we're going to boycott these supermarkets because of the price increases. We'll try and shop at smaller grocery stores rather than the big supermarkets. I don't have the best finger on the pulse of the labor market, of the housing market here. I know that my rent has gone up considerably. I know that price of groceries has gone up considerably. I don't believe that wages have gone up considerably. Some people I know have had some price increases, but the increase has been offset by the increase in rent, in groceries, in bills. Everything's going up. So I think there is more distress in the system, and so far this doesn't seem like it's reversing. Now, of course, we are approaching the end of the war in Ukraine. Approaching the end, I say cautiously. It may be maybe 1 month, it may be 6 months, maybe 12 months, could be longer. I think it will be the next 6 months, but it could take longer. Who knows how incompetent they are? It seems that Russia and the USA are making concrete steps towards that, and that let's hope the conflict draws to a close sooner than later. And there's talk about reversing the sanctions, these self-inflicted sanctions from Europe and of Europe. And I think if you alleviate those sanctions, that goes a long way towards alleviating the economic distress, because it's largely self-imposed.
It's 100% self-imposed, because we're seeing them here in Georgia. Exactly what you just described. What's going on in Bulgaria is exactly what's happening here. The prices are going up month to month. Like 1%,
just one thing to note
3%.
Is that prices tend to be sticky, meaning they go up, they don't like taking them back down. If let's say sanctions end tomorrow and everything, sanctions end tomorrow, the war's over, it doesn't mean prices are going to fall overnight. They go up faster than they come down. And,
well, the housing will. I think the housing prices will come down, but as far as like the prices of food and other things and
price
energy,
of living and whatnot,
yeah, that's going to stay the same, and the salaries aren't going to go up. That's what's happening here. So we're having the same protests. We've been having protests since elections, and some of the protests are catered to exactly what you just mentioned. Prices of rent has gone up. The price for food, for energy has gone up. It has doubled. A lot of stuff has doubled since the war started here in Georgia, and people are kind of upset. And then the EU acquisition, EU integration has been postponed. So that's another reason why people are protesting. But more or less, like I said, my gas bill for my energy gas bill has doubled just in the last month. And there are no jobs here. There's nothing. The job market is stagnant here. It has pretty much failed. And property values haven't come down. They haven't gone up, it seems like, but they've pretty much stabilized at the high prices that they are. The cost for rentals in the capital in Tbilisi is, in my district especially, is very similar to the United States. Like I'm noticing prices between $600 up to $1,000 for a 1 to 2 bedroom in the capital
and
in certain areas.
Think if there's an oversupply of housing that would pressure prices down, but you're saying that's not occurring.
That's not happening. It's not happening.
And
I think
for me, I think all prices have risen. So my landlord's like, look, I want some more money, because
Yeah.
if you factor in inflation, you've been paying a subsidized rate compared to what it used to be. So that's how I understand why has my rent increased, because the landlord wants more money for it, which is reasonable. Although we can contest the percentage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the United States, the reason why I left is because my rent went from pre-war. It was my rent for a one bedroom was like I think it was about $500. When I left, it was about $900. It was about the same price I'm renting here in Tbilisi. And then they tried to increase it when I left, and I was like, no, I'm not paying $1,000 for a one bedroom apartment in Central Florida where there's no jobs. Like, no, thank you.
Just to add, you are in a nicer apartment in Tbilisi, and it's in a nicer neighborhood. So I imagine the average price of housing in Tbilisi is not similar to the average in the USA.
Yeah, I mean, the average range that I've been seeing for a one bedroom to two bedroom is between $500 upwards of $900, depending on the size, the square meters, district, and all that. Yeah, it's still a lot. It's a lot for Georgia, because the average salary here is between $500 to $1,000 a month, and it's probably similar to that in Bulgaria. Maybe it's a little higher in Bulgaria, in the EU, but the cost of living is about the same. We did a T club on the cost of living, and it wasn't much different. So the cost for food and goods here is about the same as the European Union or Eastern Europe, and that hasn't come down. That's going up. When the prices go up with where you're at, the prices are going up here at the same time, because we're technically part of Europe. We're not EU country, but we're getting consumer goods from Europe. Most of our consumer goods at the stores, they're coming from Europe. So like a lot of our cleaning products, a lot of the appliances, a lot of some of the food is coming from Europe. Mostly canned goods like tomato sauce, stuff like that's coming from Italy, from Germany, and it's expensive. It's the same price as what you're paying there. In America, it was double. It was still higher because the shipping cost of getting it from Europe to America, obviously, and the tariffs. So, and those tariffs went up, so it's going to be even more expensive in America. So they're going to be probably paying 3 times what we pay here in Europe for our other product, same product. It's bad. It's getting bad, and I said it would get bad in 2025, and we're here and now. We're in the recession. We're in the stagnant economy,
and the bad times.
The really bad times, and Europe is seeing the worst of all of it right now. China's pretty bad too, from what I've been hearing. There are no jobs there, and that's partially not because of tariffs or anything. That's just because of the slowdown of the European economy in America. So they're not. There's not as much demand for consumer products from China as there once was. That sort of thing. That's what I think a lot of that has to do with. It has nothing to do with sanctions or any type of
And I'm not purchasing anything really because I can't afford to. So I want consumer products from China? I don't want any consumer products because I can't afford anything. So
people are just they're just making do with what they have, basically. Exactly what you're saying. That's what I'm seeing here. People are just making do with what they have. In America, it's like that too. People can't afford to buy a new phone or a new car, so they just basically try to keep their car that they have or phone, repair it. Yeah. And of course, go ahead.
Well, I think that this economic reality stems from Brussels, right? Not entirely, but largely, right? It's Brussels that's strangling business by regulations. It's major economies like Germany and France showing signs of recession. And this is the similar rhetoric that the Soviet Union made before its collapse. Of course, it came after a major war, after the war in Afghanistan. And the fascinating thing is with the US withdrawal, who knows what that looks like right now, but with the US withdrawal from Ukraine, the fascinating thing is Brussels and London, especially, they've said, we'll take, it's our cause now, we'll step up. So you can't, London, the UK armed forces can't defend London from any conventional force. If they went into Ukraine, they would be dead within 2 months. The entirety of Europe's army outside of the America, it's something, but they've sent most of their surplus equipment into the meat grinder in Ukraine. They can't produce as much as Russia. The entirety of NATO cannot even produce 25% the military industrial capacity as just Russia alone. It's crazy. So and then you've got this rhetoric from all of these European leaders who are saying continuing war is preferable to peace. They're saying this is about defending democracy. No, it's about laundering money to the military-industrial complex and the leaders and justifying a collapsing economy. Like, who's benefiting from this war and who's paying the price?
Yeah, it's the military-industrial complex. And like you said, like they were sending a lot of their equipment. Some wasn't even surplus. Some of it was actually serviceable equipment and it was ineffective. So that's just something that's interesting to note. I mean, the Leopard tanks from Germany, I guess they were destroyed within 5 minutes of getting into the battlefield, something like that.
Some of them may be still around, but they're not game changers, right? They're not like the Oreshnik that's able to, be a strategic weapon. It's a tank. Tanks are great. I mean, tanks can be destroyed. Tanks. The thing is, it's not really a tank-heavy battle. There are tanks going on. The tanks are useful, but mostly it's just a slow, grinding, attritional warfare in trenches, like World War I.
Yeah, trench warfare. Trench warfare, like the tanks were a game changer in World War I because they were first being implemented, and they did sway the war a little bit. But in World War II, tanks weren't as effective, as they were in World War I. And now we're in a modern warfare where you have drones and you have air superiority and you have satellites. It's just obsolete. Now it's just trench warfare and drones. So they're just lobbing stuff at people and, shells and things and smart bombs and all kinds of wonderful stuff. So it's not, it's a futuristic war that like is really just cannon fodder. It's just slaughter really, like Vietnam.
It's a modern war. But you talk about cannon fodder. If you read, I've read parts of it. If you read Ernst Junger's Storm of Steel, this is how he described the Battle of the Somme, just with artillery. So nowadays in Ukraine, you've got the artillery, and you've got the drones, and you've got the aerospace, and you've got the advanced weapons, and you've got the OSINT.
I mean, they're on both sides too. It's not like it's just one-sided war. They're on both sides. Russia may have a little bit better, more the advantage.
They have, supremacy in terms of numbers. They have more artillery, like
more resources. Training.
Ukraine don't have the ammunition to launch down the range. Now, it's not that Russia has an unlimited amount either. I don't know how much they're going through, but I know they have to ration it. Not to this extent of Ukraine, where they've been saying the entire war, we need more weapons, give us more bullets. And now the Trump administration, first off, the Biden administration said, here's all our bullets, here's all our ammunition, here's ammunition going back to before the Second World War and the entire Cold War, have all of it. And then they've been going around buying up other people's compatible ammunition. And now Trump, so A, we don't have any, and B, you're not getting it.
Yeah.
Whereas the Russian military-industrial complex is continuing to churn out at an accelerating rate that I haven't seen anything suggesting they're slowing down. I think they are preparing for the worst case if Europe tries to keep pushing forward. But one thing Russia said consistently is, we have no interest in going beyond Ukraine. We didn't even want to go into Ukraine. You forced us to do this. Fascinatingly, someone I know, they said to me, Adam, what's going on? My colleagues are telling me that Russia's going to go invade the Baltics, and things getting really bad. I said, relax. This is just MI6, CIA, and Brussels propaganda narratives. They've been saying it for 10 years. It's complete crap. There's no merit to it. This is what they're doing. These are just narratives. They're fiat by decree of authority, and they have no real bearing in reality. And this is the same blatant hypocrisy that's underlying European support of this conflict, where they're screaming about defending democracy. supporting a dictator who's suspended elections, outlawed opposition parties, and ruled by decree, all while demanding billions in foreign taxpayer money. And I'm just reading that the word of the year of last year is bussification, which is a term to describe forced mobilization under an accelerated procedure. In other words, military people grabbing any man they find on the street and throwing them into a bus onto the front lines. That's the word of 2024, allegedly.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't anything new. I mean, weren't they doing that during the French and British were doing that with naval men during I want to say what war, like 1800s, early 1800s. They were just grabbing. I know in like Portland, for instance, they have this underground where you can go look at the tunnels and stuff there, where they have these trap doors where like sailors would just like basically drunk people would be drinking, and they'll just pull a trap door, and by the time like you wake up, you're already out to sea, and you're now in the military, like you're in the Navy, and you can't go anywhere.
Well, there was
I know
this
they were.
in World
Yeah.
War One, though, in the UK, there was this white feather movement where a woman would give a white feather to a man out of uniform to shame them into signing up to fight, and apparently that worked, according to the history that I was taught at school. I'm like, white feather, oh the shame, oh the shame! I'm gonna have to go kill myself for my ruling glasses.
Yeah.
But I don't think UK history, at least modern history, there's been drafts. There's always been drafts in all sorts of places, but I don't think they've just said there's a man walking on the street, go and grab him and send him to the front lines. It's been more, that it's under this accelerated procedure that makes the bussification rather than just a draft.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It reminded me of like, back in the day where they just they would just grab drunk men and just put them on ships and just like militarize them. And then this was like I said, this was like 1800s. I think in the 1700s they were doing it. Yeah, just you're a loser, you're drunk. All right, now you're on a ship. You'll sober up, and now you're in the Navy.
Well, it's been, there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the war how the Russians were sending their penal colony people to the front line. Mm-hmm. That's been Russian doctrine for centuries. You're in the penal colony,
World War II, World War One,
or you can go to the front line. You can work off your sentence if you survive.
Yep, that's how it was in Vietnam. The people would go to court. You'd see the recruiter. He'd sit in the back of the courtroom, and the judge would say, "Well, do you want to go to jail or do you want to go to the military?" He's like, all right, 1 second, judge. And then like the recruiters, he's like, "Crew's in the back, go talk to him. If he says you're qualified, I'll dismiss the case. You can go to boot camp." And they would take him right away, like immediately, take him right to boot camp. They'd go to Vietnam.
They take them to boot camp. Now, I don't know. Like, I've spoken to some Ukrainian people that say I'm going off to fight, and they've been doing training. And I've also heard many secondhand reports of people not just frontline next week. Yeah. I don't know the veracity of that. I like to treat claims critically with skepticism, but I can't imagine that's not occurring. I just don't know the extent.
I mean, if anything, they basically would send them in to probably the front lines, fill sandbags, and they would train them on the job, basically train them as they go.
I've also seen genuinely handicapped, like not just, I've seen people that are over 60. I've seen people that have Down syndrome from war footage on the Ukrainian side in the trenches. And like the soldiers, they're like kicking them and like laughing at them and like shooting at the ground around them. I'm like, it sucks that he's there, but also what horrible people that he's forced to fight with. I don't know.
I mean, we saw in the Telegram groups like where they had the elderly people in foxholes, and they were, as soon as the Russian troops came in, they surrendered, and then they just shot them anyway because they didn't know if they were going to like attack them and it was the heat of the moment.
Yeah, well, You can do that.
Yeah, if you're in battle, if you're in combat, and you don't give up, you just play dead, and then you just sit there, and then
well, you can radio ahead and say, "I want to surrender. Do you accept my surrender?" And then they can say yes. That's typically how it can be done. If you're in a foxhole, someone comes up to you, you go like this, they can shoot you, because it's not clear. It's not ideal. I think we've.
I mean, they did it in World War II all the time. They would surrender. They'd come in as soon as they were invading, and they would say, "I give up," and they just shoot them anyway because they don't take prisoners. The Marine Corps, they're in normal combat.
Well, I think when they've said, "I give up, I surrender," I've seen some footage. Incidentally, a few times I've seen Ukrainians execute the Russians. I haven't seen the vice versa. Maybe 1 or 2 times it's happened. Probably has. I'm not, but I've seen many Ukrainian soldiers surrendering to Russia and going off, and they're now in prison camps in Russia or whatnot. They're sitting out the war. Some of them have been exchanged, and they'll probably be released once the war's over. I have seen at least several examples of Ukrainians executing Russian prisoners.
Yeah. Well, there was a video. There was a video where they were kneecapping Russian POWs.
I've seen all sorts of horrendous stuff like that. I try not to focus too much on it. I don't log it, but I do witness these. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it definitely happens. I mean, we're fighting this conflict it's World War II, man. It's World War II level combat. So like we haven't seen a war like this. Even Vietnam wasn't like this. This is World War II trench warfare. Like we haven't seen this in Europe since World War II. Yeah. Maybe Korea, but Korea is not in Europe, you know what I mean? But in Europe, like they haven't seen anything like this since World War II. Even Kosovo wasn't like this, But yeah. It is what it is, man. Dude, this is the front line. The front line is the largest front line since World War II. It was larger than the front line in Korea. And like I said, 3 million casualties in Korea over 2 years. It's got to be well over 3 million, dude. It's got to be.
I believe
it's going on 3 years now.
I believe it's 2.5.
Yeah, it's got to be close to 3. 2.5 is about right. Yeah.
I think 2 million casualties Ukraine and 250K, 300K Russians. We can argue. We can say 1.5 million. I think the lowest I can concede, and I don't believe it, would be 1.5 million Ukrainian casualties and 400K Russian casualties. It's like a best case for the Ukrainian. I don't believe it, but I'll be willing to concede that, and that's still terrible for the Ukrainians. So I think it's like the Russians. I'm hearing lots of people say 100K. I don't think that counts. Say the 33,000 dead in Bakhmut, I think it's more 150K. I don't think it's quite that many dead Russians. I think it's over 100K.
Well, we're talking about casualties, not necessarily KIA, but including
if
injuries.
There's 150K, if there's max 150K KIA Russians, and I don't think it's that high, then double it and then add that. So 300K max casualties, which 400,000, and I don't believe that figure. So I say about 250K casualties, dead and severely wounded, and Ukrainians. I think it's at least 600K dead. People are saying as much as 800K. I don't know. Let's say 600 again. Take that figure, at least double it. 1.2 plus 6, 1.8. Round up, 2 million. So 2 million casualties, dead and severely wounded.
I think it's closer to 5 million, but we'll see.
Or we won't. Who knows?
There's a lot of POWs, as well as there's a lot of people that went AWOL on both sides, Russian and Ukrainian.
They're saying it could be 5 or 10 years before we have an accurate number, and there's going to be uncertainty there. The Red Army, we're told 27 million died in World War II. I've heard Colonel McGregor say it could be as much as 40 million. We don't know. And I'm like, 40 million, that's a lot of people. That's like 50% difference. So maybe we'll never know.
I would say a conservative estimate, if you were to compare wars, conventional wars, the last conventional war we had was Korea. with this type of front and this amount of soldiers fighting on both sides, because the Chinese Red Army was involved in the Korean War, Americans, and then the Korean regulars. So I mean, it's the same thing. We're in a proxy. So you've got Ukrainians fighting Russians, regulars, and then you've got National Guardsmen on the Russian side. Plus, you have private security firms with what was, sorry, I'm losing thought here. Russian private security. What was the name of the firm again that they were using? Ragnar, yeah.
Wagner.
And then
These private military corporations are not allowed to operate on Russian territory. So before the war, before the special military operation, those 4 oblasts were not Russia; they were Ukraine. So it was a gray area. They were allowed. Once they were annexed, it was about bringing them, either sending them elsewhere, like Africa, or bringing them under the Russian military itself, which is why Prigozhin, against orders, went into Bakhmut to extend his tour, or the Wagner tour. And then when they captured Bakhmut, and the Ministry of Defense said, "All right, sign the contracts," and he went, "No," March, and that all that occurred. So
there's a lot of private contractors from America. I'm not going to get too far into it, but I did.
My
I did
understanding.
See,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just saying. I saw on the private job boards for military contracts, and I did see that they were looking for American military that were active duty, that were inactive, and they call them IR, inactive reserve, and they were calling these guys up. They were working as private contractors for training, different type of stuff, but they were there, and the same people we like when I showed you the advert. Then because I'm on LinkedIn and I was connected to a lot of these people, I showed you the advert on LinkedIn and all these different professional sites that I use for what I do in my business. And then I showed you the individual that was found dead, and they just left and they signed a military contract to go to Ukraine. They died in Ukraine. And I was like, smoking gun right there. So they 100% had U.S. military private contractors working inside Ukraine. Near the front lines, because this guy died near the front lines and he was a military contractor. So plus we have the Georgian private contractors that were there, volunteers. So they call them volunteers, but these guys were attached to Ukrainian special forces units. They were training in the field and they were on the front lines.
They call it sheep dipping, where you take like a US army person, you sheep dip them in Ukrainian insignia.
Well, they're liaisons. They're liaisons. That's what I did in Saudi Arabia. I was doing military training, and a lot of special forces guys were there, so I was teaching them languages, and then they, the special forces, basically train them in combat arms and different techniques and things. Mostly the Saudi special forces, Royal Saudi military, and that's basically what they're doing in Ukraine. They're actually in Ukraine training in the field, because you have to train them on the HIMARS and the different types of equipment. It's mostly special forces they were working with. They weren't working with regular military IR, regular military, but they were working obviously with Azov and special forces, training them for covert operations and things. But they were there, 100%. They were there. I saw the contracts. I get the same contracts, and I'm not going to Ukraine. They asked me, I'm like, no, I'm not going to Ukraine. No, thank you. It's not my war. I'm not going there.
So the issue with this massive centralization of the EU, right? They told that the narrative was that this European Union would bring economic prosperity, peace, and democracy. Instead, we're seeing economic collapse, endless war, and authoritarian rule. And as the EU is sinking economically, its leaders keep doubling down on war, inflationary policies, and authoritarian control. These economic and political failures mirror the USSR's collapse, central planning, bureaucracy, and forced unity.
Right. That's what I've been saying that for a while now, that literally the EU is basically the modern version of the Soviet Union. They basically mirrored it off of the United States, with the states, where you can travel independently within states, but they were part of a union. But you see the difference between the states is it's a federation. So it's like Russia, where you have a federal territory, and then states have rights, but they're still under the guise of the 14th Amendment, which we talked about previously. Well, the corporationism.
Well, the EU, it seems they have this goal of the Federation of Europe, and it's step by step integration towards getting there. I think I'm losing the national currency here in a couple months, or even next month, and it's the euro now. And there were protests there, and they shot up the European Parliament building with paint. With paint, they shot it up.
Oh, paintballs, yeah.
Yeah, like red paint all over, and they're saying, "We want our currency. Don't do this. It's already pegged. Like, you've already pegged me. Yeah, please don't take away my sovereignty."
That's what's going on here in Georgia. Is like our currency is pegged to the U.S. dollar and euro now. It doesn't change. The currency is staying at 2.83, 2.85 to the U.S. dollar, and the same with the euro. It hasn't changed since I've been here for 3 months. It stayed the same. But yeah, we have inflation. It's like we have massive inflation now. So obviously we're very closely tied to the European Union.
When you peg the currency, you lose the alternative to a peg is a floating one. And when it's floating, it means that if things are more expensive, you don't buy as much. Like there's a corrective mechanism that kind of equilibriums. When it's pegged, you don't have that. So
that's what's happening here. Like I said, my gas bill doubled in like a month, and the food prices are continually going up. So obviously, there's something they're doing with the currency here. Obviously, they're because they're integrating us in the EU, no matter what, if we like it or not. And I think like we had talked about before we started, that I guess there's a temporary pause to the EU acquisition. I don't think that's happening. I think they're saying it publicly, like, "Oh no, we're pausing it," but I think they're going forward with it.
It's a temporal thing. It's a couple. It's 2, 3, maximum 4 years. I think it's 2 or 3 years. It's like it's not a reversal. It's not an inflection. It's not a revolution. It's just hey, you've been interfering with us too much. Like, let's just chill for a couple years. Yes.
I mean, I can see Georgia becoming an EU country, definitely. We don't have any land connection with Europe. We just have the Black Sea, so we're separated by ocean. Now, if Turkey becomes an EU country, then we obviously, we'll be an EU landlocked country. We'd be a land barrier with Turkey.
Turkey's not becoming EU.
I don't think they will. That's why it's kind of weird, because it's like you're going to have an EU country that's not even connected landmass-wise to, Europe, but I mean, that'd be like having Cyprus become part of EU. It's like it's an island.
Cyprus is not.
I don't think it is. You have Greek Cyprus, which is, but I think even Greek Cyprus is like
Cyprus has been a full member of the EU since 2004.
Right, yeah. So, but you have the Turkish side. So they've been at war with each other. So it's an interesting situation.
The Turks said Greece cannot have Cyprus. They invaded it. It's not internationally recognized by as much.
That's what I'm trying to say. Something like that, yeah. Because it's an island nation, and it's like like I said, it's like Georgia. It's just we're like a freaking island in the middle of the Caucasus that's not connected to Europe, just like Cyprus. And it's like, are we technically EU, or are we just like a sovereign state? I mean, what exactly is our situation? And they're already, like I said, they've been flying the EU flags for 5 years now since I've been here. I've been in the country for 15 years off and on. I think it will be EU country, but I think the EU is going to collapse. Something's going to happen. There's going to be some kind of economic, who knows? At this point, everything. I said there would be economic turmoil in 2025. I didn't think Europe. I thought Europe would see significant issues, but I thought they'd be okay until the Ukrainian conflict, and I didn't foresee that. And then the massive migration from all the wars, from the wars in Syria and everywhere.
Well, you've got the issue of deindustrialization, and that's been accelerated by the decoupling of Russian energy, which is just efficient, plentiful, right there. But then you've also got the regulation of Europe, the bureaucracy of Europe. The one thing Europe's always had going for it is technological progress and a high degree of human capital, meaning the people are generally better than some other people, generally in economic areas, kind of, right? But you've got this but you've all these underlying trends of central planning, bureaucracy, regulation, authoritarianism. It's not stopped. It's not ceased. It's never gone away. It's just continued to go. And the great thing about the crisis of the war, first off, you have the Corona crisis, and excellent. We can do whatever. And then you had the war, and they just keep going. And it's the same, like, central planning always fails. You always run into the calculation problem. The USSR attempted to centrally manage economies across multiple republics, and you had a massive bureaucratic inefficiency. The EU, likewise, it dictates economic policy to 27 vastly different countries, like Moscow did to the Soviet republics and the Warsaw Pact also.
But also, like Brussels is kind of like Moscow, right? Everything goes through Brussels, or like just like Moscow, and then like you have an unelected committee that runs everything, like Moscow, and like similar like Brussels, you have unelected people that are elected by parliamentary people. The people don't have a voice on who runs that committee, so it's almost exactly the same in a sense.
And like, for example, Greece, I think that one example, I think Greece voted to leave the EU 4 times. Why 4 times? Because the first time they voted to leave, the EU said, do it again. Second time they voted to leave, the EU said, do it again. The third time they voted to leave, the EU said, do it again. The fourth time they voted to remain, the EU said, good boy. That was the legitimate vote. Likewise, in Romania, they elected some guy, or he won a poll, and the EU said, do it again. This was recent. Do it again. That wasn't legitimate for some reason or whatever. I think they've just raided his apartment or something. And they said, oh, look at all these guns we found at his accomplice, at his friend's apartment. So, well, hold on a minute. Like, was it in his apartment or was it not? But I did see pictures on X of like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, I don't know how many US dollars in a safe, some very nice gun collection, a Russian passport. I'm not sure if it was his or otherwise. But like the Soviet Union, which silenced political dissent through media control, propaganda, and state surveillance, jailing, exiling, or killing opposition figures. Same things happening in the European Union today, especially Germany. It is. I've seen people be arrested for voicing support or even being somewhat neutral, favorable towards Russia, or not in opposition to Ukraine. Now that's an exception rather than the rule, which is why it gets reported. I'm sure there are lots and lots and lots and tens of millions of people who oppose this war and maybe aren't as vocal about it. And even those who are, for the state to take notice of you, you have to either do it publicly, like to a platform, to an audience, or someone has to report you. And they say, oh, we've had a report, and therefore there's the justification for us to go in.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. I mean, then silencing a lot of people here in Tbilisi that are protesting because of the EU situation from the Dream Party. But a lot of those have been protesters that have been protesting and then publicly viewing their dissent. I don't know. I don't get involved in that too much because that's Georgia politics versus I'm just reporting what I see on the in the street and what's going on around me. But yeah, it's an interesting time we live in Europe. It was an interesting time for me in America during the Biden administration, or the Biden regime, however you want to call it. So I left because I was tired of it. I was just tired of the DEI and I'd made a video about it, of what I was tired of, the goy slop. And hopefully, I guess RFK and Trump is trying to change all that, but I don't know if they're going to be able to. You know what I mean? It's a lot of there's a lot of crap to fix and a lot of crap to clean up. And I said it's going to take 4 years. It's going to take an entire administration in order to clean up all the mess that was left, before. Even the Trump stuff that he tried to get through, and he's got to clean up a lot of that stuff too. So,
well, I don't trust Trump, Musk, and Doge and whatnot. I mean, if Trump wanted to deal with US aid, he could have done it in the first 4 years. He could have just talked about it in the first 4 years. He could have sent. Why didn't he? Because it's not about the spend. It's not about the save. It's about. There's parts of it, right? Like
He
you've
did. He
learned
did. He did.
more.
My friend worked for USAID in the US when Trump was his first term, and he said they weren't sure if they were going to have a job the next day. And he ended up. I guess they closed his whole entire department. So that he did do stuff with. He did close some USAID. He did. There was some.
Why was it
It wasn't. It
never
wasn't
a
at the level it is
mainstream
now.
narrative? Yeah.
It was never mainstream, yeah, and it was never. It was kind of done quietly, but it was. They were affected during Trump's administration's first term. I do know that for a fact.
It
From
was
inside
no
baseball.
revolutions, no. Yeah.
No,
Um,
but his
I
hands
will
were tied. I mean, there was a mixed Congress, like so. It was there. He didn't have the support that he does now. Now he has a rubber stamp, like I was saying in the inauguration podcast and the election night, that he's got a rubber stamp now, so he can pretty much do whatever he wants. You know.
I will say, look, I'm not a fan of the Soviet Union, but and it was a horrible place to be, and I wouldn't want to live under it. But it did have some strengths which modern Europe lacks entirely. You know, the EU tries just purely by fiat, decree by authority, or my definition of fiat is abuse of power. The EU tries to project itself as a beacon of progress, but in many ways it is weaker, more fragile, and less culturally coherent than the USSR ever was. You know, there's a reason why Russians today have voted constantly for Stalin as being one of the greatest statesmen or greatest Russians ever. You know, he did a lot of state building. Grand, inspiring architecture, statues, murals. There was a beautiful national aesthetic, and like you look at the Moscow metro system, for example.
Yeah, the metro systems. Even here, the metro systems were well built. Yeah, they were well built here in Tbilisi, the capital.
Like the Soviets had this clear ideological and artistic vision, even if it was propagandistic. I really liked the Soviet realism, the propaganda art, beautiful. And I don't know if I'm not a competent Russian speaker, but I've listened to some of their like music and cinema, and it's you know, promoting heroism, discipline, and national pride, and it's really quite beautiful. In contrast, the EU, it pushes just a weak and bureaucratic globalist aesthetic. There's no great artistic movement, no architecture that inspires. It's soulless glass building, corporate advertising, like block modernism. It's and there doesn't seem to be any real vision of unity of culture. It's just a patchwork of competing interests with no central identity. Mm-hmm. Artistically, ideologically, it's hollow. It's just ruling class interest against yours.
Well, that you mentioned the architecture. Like it's all block and like very what is the word? They use cement, glass, and different types. It's really kind of boring architecture that you see going up in a lot of European countries, predominantly like Germany and Western Europe. It's not, you know, there's nothing interesting about it. There's not a lot of art coming out of Europe anymore. You know, during the 60s, 70s, even in the 90s, there was still a lot of artistic stuff coming out of Europe. A lot of film, a lot of different things and music, and now it's whatever. There's just dead, you know. And America's like that too. It's just there's no real quality artistic stuff coming out of America either.
And look,
that's where the innovation comes through.
Under communism, here in Bulgaria, I've been to some art galleries, and it gave like a bio about some of these beautiful artists that I've seen. And it's like, oh yeah, this guy, he was disappeared by the communists between these dates and here and here because he was an artist, because he was innovating, because he wasn't just doing as he was told. And, you know, he was tortured between here and here. I'm not saying it's great under communism. I'm just saying that the EU's neoliberal model is kind of... it's kind of on a peer
it's very
level
similar.
Of communism.
Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah.
Although the EU, the USSR, despite its flaws, provided a more stable working class existence.
This is true.
People didn't starve or freeze, even if they had limited luxuries and limited essentials.
Well, under Gorbachev, it's a little bit different though. When he tried to industrialize, like what Mao did, there's a lot of starvation.
It was guaranteed employment, housing, and basic needs were covered. Education, healthcare were government provided. Again, I'm not a communist. It's like to provide this, you have to steal from people. I'm not a fan of that.
Exactly.
But likewise, the Soviet Union of Europe, that's still happening. It's just now it's there's not even the veneer of helping the bottom. It's just crushing people from two angles.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I think we pretty much covered what we needed to cover. Do you want to final any type of conclusion? We're getting close to an hour on this.
So like again, we're not fans of the communists or the Soviet Union. And so one of these narratives of the Eurocrats is that Putin wants to reestablish the Soviet Union. Now, I think that anyone that believes this doesn't know history, hasn't looked into the Soviet Union. This is a quote that everyone knows that does know about this, which is from Vladimir Putin. Anyone who does not mourn for the Soviet Union has no heart, and anyone who wants to bring it back has no brain, right? But at the very least, there was some, that heart comment, there was some appealing aspects to it. It was ultimately unsustainable, always was, because of this centralization, bureaucracy, and the nature of central planning. But at least it provided stability, a strong national identity, a clear cultural vision. The European Union, on the other hand, is a fragile mess. It's obsessed with economic centralization, which is not working. It's forcing cultural destruction with no unifying vision. Diversity is our strength. And then they're punishing the EU member states that don't want to go along with this multicultural experiment, like Poland, Hungary,
Georgia,
more Eastern Europe, Georgia. It's this political authoritarianism without a national strength, but more, I'm going to use a German word, a Weltanschauung. And this is something that, and maybe you can pronounce it better. I know you speak better German than me. This is something that an Austrian painter said about his nation back, I don't know, 90 years ago. He said, look, one of the big problems of our nation is that we don't have this worldview. That's what it means, Weltanschauung. So we need to instill this worldview, and through the communists, they have one. So we have this worldview, we have this people, we have unity, and so we push forward. And that's just like, we don't have, like, the EU is for most people, I think it's, as you said, I'm just struggling to get by.
That's pretty much it. I mean, that's what the word that I'm getting here is just people are just living, breathing, and like just sitting around waiting for it, something to get better, something to change. But it's just getting progressively worse every day. And I just came into this and like I thought it would be a little bit better than America, but America's bad. It's really bad. I mean, it's not like it's any better. But Europe is definitely seeing serious repercussions of the self-imposed sanctions from the Ukrainian-Russian war.
And it's not just the sanctions, right? It's this multicultural policy.
That as well.
It's
the
the
DEI,
inflation. Yeah. It's the government spending, the bureaucracy, the overregulation. It's the squeeze from the top and the bottom, squeezing to enrich themselves, plunder the society. And it's all a result of central planning, central government bureaucracy. And it's the problem of government. We need to limit the government, push it back. And that's what I said earlier. The EU promised economic prosperity for Europe, but through the centralization of power and authority, through their fiat mandates, Europe's in a pretty bad position now. Is it worse without the EU? I don't know. But certainly what they're doing now doesn't seem to be working.
No, not at all. It's like, and like I said, like all the Western economies, they're pretty much seem like they're doing the same thing. It's the same agenda. It's the fake and gay economy, the fake and gay agenda that we pretty much broken down, that we've talked about, discussed in this podcast of the Tea Club. So yeah, I don't think anything's going to change. I mean, you're obviously in America, things are changing under Trump slowly but surely. But we'll see what exactly happens and transpires in the next 3.5 years under his administration. But yeah, in Europe, they're really putting their heels down to try to prevent any type of real economic prosperity or any type of change, or they're like doubling down, it seems. and it'll be the downfall of European Union. I think that's what I think will happen. That's my closing remark.
Well, my closing remark is just looking to America. Trump said 4 days ago at CPAC, "I hope I will be remembered as a peacemaker, not a conqueror." And peace is prosperity. And so the Americas said, we're looking at the facts, and now finally we're trying to impose a more realistic, pragmatic approach to governance, at least on the international stage, as well as some reforms internally. Whereas Europe said, okay, well, we're going to disregard realism, keep going with ideological fervor, keep going with our derangement, double down, triple down. We're going to take up the mantle that the US is abandoning, and it can't afford it. And it's not a winning thing because it's ultimately without foundation. So down with the Eurocrats, down with the Soviet Union of Europe, and hopefully the Europe that emerges out of this will be stronger and more robust and more free. I doubt it, because I don't think I think it's terminal. Right? I don't think we can escape this progressive cancer that is government in Europe, especially. Hopefully, but yeah.
Usually, we know how this ends. We know how this ends. We've seen it throughout history, and we know how this ends. Similar with the paper that I wrote in 2014 for 2025. What exactly we would see, and we're seeing it now over bubble behavior, speculation, FOMO, and the same bureaucracy and lack of transparency and lack of governance, and the governance like the DEI and all that. I didn't even include DEI in my original paper in 2014, but that was kind of something that is what we're seeing now. And I think the DEI is definitely that socialist communist, equity, and that's what's causing
equity. It's a fiat word, equity. Equity means fairness. Well, what's equitable is to leave me alone with your coercion and let things be meritocratic. It's not equity to steal from me, to rob from me, to persecute me, to oppress me, to coerce me, to benefit people who are unproductive, lazy, or just naturally maybe unable to succeed as well. What's equitable is to leave it alone, laissez-faire. So it's a fiat word, an abuse of power word. It's a narrative.
Politician's word from Shawshank Redemption. Yeah. All right, brother. It's nice to have you on. Thanks, guys. Like and subscribe. Visit Adam Maxwell on Liberty Rising, and donate. Go to our sponsors. Go to my sponsors. Sorry, and join our locals channel. Help support us. Donate there. Sign up. Mine's $4 a month. Rumble 3 gets you $3 off your first month's membership. And I'm going to be posting my book, Unleash Your Inner Sigma Male, on there when it's completed, which is very soon because I'm working on it actively right now. And deep dives like this. This is just this is a premiere of what the type of stuff that we really get deep into on the T Club. We get deeper than this actually, and there's lots of interesting stuff that you get to see on T Club that you can't see on the Rumble, YouTube, or the other platforms that we're on. But that being said, I bid you guys adieu. Adam, thank you again, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace. Do Sigma males make good leaders? That's the other question. Yeah, I would say so. I would say that Sigma males make excellent leaders. And the reason why they make excellent leaders is because they're authentic, they're transparent, excellent communication skills, and they often possess self-confidence and leadership qualities.